Hey everyone. So before I get into my interview with Dr. Chaffee, I just want to let you know about our new gut brain health community called Wired for Healing. If you guys have tried every protocol in the world, maybe you've been injured from psych drugs, you've done every diet, you've been every type of doctor, you've emptied your bank account, and you're just tired of the bullshit. We started this community called Wired for Healing. It's myself, Annabelle Smithson, Bacame, and Pim Jansen. And we really try to take a holistic approach to different modalities of healing, like neuroplasticity training, lifestyle and dietary interventions. So looking at like exercise, sleep, light, getting community, getting the support that you need. So if you guys want to take a look, you go limbic-training.com, type in the code healing me to get 10% off of your first month. And I'll link that down in the description below. Hope you guys enjoy the interview. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Thank you. Where did this sort of these sort of like ideas on meat being bad for you, red meat's toxic, and red meat's going to kill you, give you cancer and heart disease, and so on and so forth. You have to eat more plant-based. Where
Mhm.
where where did we get so wrong? Where did these ideas sort of come from, do you think?
Well, I think the one that really caused the biggest paradigm shift was the 1977 USDA declaration that cholesterol caused heart disease and saturated fat increased cholesterol. Therefore, you should stay away from both. And that's really, if you look at the consumption data in America, things really started changing then. And we were already reducing the amount of animal fat we were using. We were replacing it with seed oils and trans fats and Crisco and things like that. Partially hydrogenated vegetable oil or fully hydrogenated vegetable oil, which is margarine. And so we were already replacing animal fats, but that was the one that really switched gears. And so, since the 1970s, we've reduced red meat by over 33%, reduced fat intake by around the same, increased fruits and vegetables by roughly the same, tripled our high fructose corn syrup, over tripled the amount of seed oils we were using. So that was a big change in the consumption. And that's when you see the largest change in the obesity rate, heart disease prevalence, and other disease prevalences as well. We know that was a lie. The Journal of the American Medical Association published in 2016, actually through the UCSF published it in JAMA. Actual internal memos from the sugar companies in the 60s detailing how they paid off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease when it was really sugar. And one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and it was he who authored and published that very report vilifying cholesterol. This was a hotly debated subject for decades. I mean, I saw a JAMA paper back from 1956, and they were saying like, yes, it's generally accepted in the medical community that cholesterol, causes heart disease. However, this is based on extremely weak evidence, extremely flawed studies, and it went through all of them and just completely destroyed them. Ansel Keys is a very famous researcher. He came up with the RDAs, and he was also one of these paid shills of the sugar company. We know this. We know what their contracts were. We know what they got paid. About $6,500, about the $50,000 in today's valuation. So they got a mid-sized sedan car like a Camry or something like that. That's what their integrity was worth, and the health of the humanity was worth. So we know this was a fraud, and so you should throw that out. Any premises or any conclusions that you've wrought from a false premise should be thrown out, and you should start from scratch. And so we really need to start over. And if you look at their data, if you look at Ansel Keys's data, they actually didn't show a correlation between cholesterol and heart disease at all. Maybe a very weak correlation, but most of it was just no correlation whatsoever. And in fact, Ansel Keys himself ran some randomized controlled trials, highest level of evidence, level 1 evidence, and they found that they tried to reduce cholesterol by giving unsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats, and in fact, heart disease rate and heart attacks and cardiovascular deaths increased. And so, and some studies just didn't change at all. So there's no improvement. And some studies with large randomized control trials showed actually things got worse, and they buried these studies. They buried them for decades. And so one has come out just in the last sort of 10 years. Another one was buried for 20 years or so. And they asked authors, well, why did you not publish this at the time? Like, why didn't this come out? And, was there something wrong with it? Was it flawed? It's like, no, there was nothing wrong with the study itself. We just, we were pretty disappointed with the outcome. Well, that's not how this works. We're trying to further human understanding and knowledge, unless we're trying to push a narrative. And that's exactly what they were doing. So I think that was the biggest paradigm shift. But I think this actually started about 100 years ago with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who are religiously anti-meat. And there was one of their prophetesses, I forget her name, but anyway, sort of late 1800s, early 1900s. She
Ellen
said,
White.
yeah, that's I'm sure
Ellen
that's
White.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she had this vision from God. God spoke to her and said that he doesn't want us eating meat. They thought that eating meat made you lustful, made you want to fornicate, and therefore, because lust is a sin, that meat was sinful. And so they're saying this is wrong. God wants us to stop eating meat. So she got a young Dr. Harvey Kellogg, who then became Dr. Kellogg, and a very influential scientist. I believe he was even a congressman at one point. And eponymous for Kellogg's cereal. And he was, basically a zealot of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And he is also the one who convinced the American government to recommend that American boys get circumcised. They said this would help some sort of vague health issues, which it doesn't. There's no actual difference between health outcomes of circumcised and uncircumcised men if they practice proper hygiene. And the thought there was, from records after the fact, was that he was actually doing that to deter boys and men from masturbating and fornicating, because it's much more difficult to do both if you don't have a foreskin. And then coming up with Kellogg's cereal to try to suppress our hormones. So again, we weren't lustful and we weren't eating meat. And so, he was just obsessed with other people's sexual habits, and he had some weird ones himself. He would give himself like daily enemas. He made a machine that could give him that could pump like something like 20 something gallons of water in and out of his colon in 60 seconds. So like this guy, he had some weird predilections himself, but he was obsessed with other people's predilections, and so it was quite strange. But so they were religiously involved and tied up with people eating meat or not, and they actually started the field and study of dietetics and nutritional sciences in 1917, and so they've been at the bedrock of nutritional sciences in America and elsewhere, because they started the field, and they've had extremely strong influence in the field all the way through to present day. And they're still very much involved with this. This is where you see a lot of these plant-based studies, like the Adventist trial. Well, what is it? The Seventh-day Adventist trial. They're looking at this population and these people. And it's this study. Loma Linda Medical Center in California is a Seventh-day Adventist medical school and hospital. I remember when I was looking at medical schools, I was looking at the ones in California. So I was living in California at the time. I was sort of deciding, do I want to, sort of apply up in Seattle for UW, or, keep my residency status in California. So I was looking around, and the Loma Linda one, it just said, we will not accept any applications if you're not in the Seventh-day Adventist Church and you need a letter from your priest saying that you're a member in good standing, sort of thing. So this is where a lot of this research comes from. And a lot of these vegan doctors and, quote unquote researchers, a lot of them are Seventh-day Adventists themselves. And in fact, the WHO, I think was it 2015, where they said that processed meat was a carcinogen and red meat was a likely carcinogen, which now people are saying that it's definitely a carcinogen because they said that. And I was like, no, actually, they said it was a likely carcinogen. Then there was a definite carcinogen. And they said the processed meats had a low level association with carcinogen. But what is a processed meat? Ground beef is a processed meat, but there's nothing different about that just by grinding it. It's all the sugar and additives and garbage that you add to it. It's not the meat itself; it's the things you've added to it. That's what would be a problem, if anything. And that board that put forward that proclamation, they cherry picked studies that they chose to look from. They omitted several others that completely contradicted their position, and a lot of people voted against it. Said, "Hey, we should be using these other studies. We shouldn't be coming out. This is the wrong decision." And they got outvoted and or just out clouted. And then they said, well, the people that dissented say, well, hey, look, you should declare your biases, because there's the majority of them were like vegans, vegetarians, or Seventh-day Adventists, or a combination thereof. And so they didn't do that. They didn't declare their biases, and they didn't say that they omitted all these different studies. And that is clear bias. That's clear bias in the literature. There's other biases as well. I don't know if it's from the Seventh-day Adventists or whomever they've influenced, but you look at things that say, well, meat is worse. And so when you reduce meat and eat more whole fruits and vegetables, things get better. And that sounds fine, but when you actually look at the data, it's not showing that at all. They lump in processed food and junk with meat, because pizza sometimes has meat as toppings. Sometimes pizza equals meat. And fast food, because it has meat in the ingredients, sometimes fast food equals meat, right? Because you have meat in a hamburger bun. Forget all the bread, forget all the sugary sauces and other vegetables and seed oils, and forget the French fries, deep fried and trans fats, and the sodas. You're just teeming with high fructose corn syrup. Forget all that. It's meat, right? That's the only part of that matters. And so what it's really showing is when people eat less junk food and eat more whole food, they do better. And I'm shocked by that. I was not expecting that result. And I think something you've pointed out, that people are eating whole food are much more likely to be affluent. Will have more money. They'll have more access to things that money provides access to, like healthcare. And you'll live in maybe a nicer area where you don't have as much pollution. You don't have to maybe do a drudge job that's going to hurt you in certain ways. And so it's a healthy user bias as well. More likely to exercise, or less likely to smoke, less likely to drink to excess, and so on. Less likely doesn't mean they don't, but it's just less likely. So there are a lot of problems with these studies. And so you always have to ask, well, compared to what? And you have to look at that. Well, compared to a fast food diet, healthy whole food plant eaters that go jogging and don't smoke are better than that alternative. Okay, great. But that's not answering the question that we want. The question that we want is meat bad for you? And that's not something that they've looked at. There are studies, and some that Sally Norton has put in her book, where they actually, will change the amount of plants that people eat, and actually don't find that there's any detriment to like reducing these sorts of plants or adding in other plants. It doesn't provide necessarily a benefit. So there are other studies as well that actually go straight counter to that. I think the only study that I know of that actually looks at whole food plant-based diet and a whole food meat-based diet is one that was published it was a British study, I believe, published in 1931 in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association. And it looked at the Maasai, which are famously carnivorous or animal-based. They just eat blood, meat, and milk, and they really don't eat any plants. And which is actually some people are starting to say, well, actually the Maasai eat mostly plants. They just eat some of that. They just drink some blood on the weekends or something. Like, dude, get out of here. Like, that's never ever been the case. And and they contrasted that with the Akikiu, who were a tribe that were neighboring them, and they actually intermarried. And so this was a very good study because they were genetically similar populations. And the Akikuyu had been sort of displaced off their land. They didn't be able to hunt or live sort of more naturally. So they actually were, farming. They were growing crops and things like that. So eating roots and tubers and berries and fruits and leaves and grains and seeds and things like that, but mostly plant-based and genetically similar populations, right? And the differences were staggering. The Maasai were on average, adult males were on average 5 inches taller, 23 pounds heavier of lean body mass, and they were on average 50% stronger as well. And the Akikiu had a lot of health issues that the Maasai didn't have. The Maasai were much less likely to get, diabetes and other chronic issues. That was something that was prevalent in the Akikiu, even though this was a vegan's dream. They're just living in a commune, basically just living off the land. There's no industrial fertilizers or pesticides. They're just living in the African savanna and eating plants. I mean, this is exactly how we're told we're supposed to eat in the last 5 years. Before that, no one ever claimed that humans were herbivores. That's a brand new assertion. Before that, everyone knew that humans have evolved as carnivores and we're hunter gatherers, but emphasis on the hunter. And now it's only very recently people say, oh no, actually we're herbivores, even though you can't get a basic complement of nutrients from plants. But that's an aside. I mean, that whole argument just goes away when you just, where are you getting B12 from? Sorry. And all the other things, there's tons of other nutrients that you're missing. They just don't exist. And so that can't be our evolved diet. But with the Akikiu, they found that they were very unwell in various other ways. They were much more likely to get infections, chest infections, ulcers, diabetes, tooth decay. They had underdeveloped jaws, had a bunch of cavities and crooked teeth, and a lot of nutritional deficiencies. And so the researchers started supplementing them with nutrients and to try to get them back up to normal levels, normal blood levels. And they found that actually didn't make them more healthy. They didn't change their health outcomes. But when they started feeding them meat and started taking away some of the, or at least replacing the plants that they were eating with meat, that actually did reverse their health issues, and they started getting better and fighting off their infections. And you can't develop again. They're not going to grow 5 inches, but they at least were well and they could be healthy. So that's the only one I know of where you're comparing like to like. And that's the only thing that matters. We're not talking about eating processed food garbage. We're not talking about eating pizza. We're talking about eating whole meats or whole veggies or even an omnivorous diet. But there aren't any studies apart from that even look at that or ask that question.
That was a great breakdown to that question.
Okay.
You covered every base in there. We talked a little bit before the interview about how some studies are just so corrupt. They'll lump in, they take a look at 2 subsets of people, and they'll lump in steak with ultra processed foods and say, well, steak, here we go. Here's a high fat diet and high protein diet causing people to gain weight, right? But they lump that in with fruit cups. Like there's an actual study that lumps steak in with fruit cups and some other stuff. It's absolutely ridiculous. But just touching on the Seventh-day Advance, because you are in Australia. This is the home of Dr. Gary Fettke, I believe. And I had Belinda Fettke on my channel. I want to get your opinion on this. So in 2022, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine committed to donating free access to educational resources on their website to 100,000 health professionals, and to cover the cost of or half the cost of lifestyle medicine training and certification for 1,400 primary care providers as part of the White House Conference Action Plan, with a further offer to 200,000 health professionals in New York later this year. So this is something that the Biden and Harris administration has committed to and is actually implementing programs and funding to. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I guess I'm not too familiar with that organization and
well, that's part of the Seventh-day Adventists. Yeah, that's the Seventh-day Adventists. Yeah, so that's part of their educational program for educating doctors on how to educate their patients.
Yeah, their re-education.
Yeah. So not exactly a question, but I want to throw that out there.
No, that's interesting. I hadn't come across that, and that's worrying. It is very worrying because they're going to be hit with a lot of biased information. Here's the thing that everyone says. They said, well, doctors only get 1 hour of nutritional lectures in medical school. It's actually not even that. We talk about cholesterol and that's it. And people say, oh yeah, cholesterol is bad. That's it. Maybe it's sort of peppered in every now and then. I learned fructose is metabolized into fatty droplets in your liver. Okay, that I guess that you could call that nutrition. It's and it's true. Um, and we go through the biochemistry of cholesterol metabolization and things like that. And I guess you could call that nutrition in a sense, but I mean, it wasn't geared as like, oh, hey, we're going to talk about nutrition. Like that was about as close as we got. But I'm not actually too concerned about that because what would they get taught? I was like, oh, well, they're not taught nutrition. Nutritionists aren't taught nutrition. Nutritionists are taught propaganda. They're taught plant-based propaganda. The top nutrition universities, nutrition programs in the US are fully indoctrinated and invested in this whole plant-based veganism
Mm,
scam, really.
right.
And Bastyr University, which is up in Kirkland, Washington, where I grew up, I've known a number of people that have gone there, and it at least was, and probably still is, or goes back and forth as being the number one graduate nutrition program in the country. And so they are fully plant-based. And I've spoken to a number of people there, and that's exactly, it's just cookie cutter vegan vegetarians coming out of there, and they just think and act the exact same way. And so I'm happy that we're not taught that. I'm happy we're not indoctrinated with that. That at least gives people fresh eyes, so that they can look at this for themselves and say like, oh, okay, like, well, I'll look at the data myself. I'll read the studies myself. And then when they're a doctor, they can actually look at the studies themselves. Hopefully this backfires. Hopefully enough of these guys and ladies are um you know the type of doctor who really does read the full study, and doesn't just listen to what someone tells them about what a study says and what the conclusions are, and they read that and go like, wait a minute, there's fruit cups in here in the in the steak group. Like, hold on a second, that doesn't actually prove what they say it's going to prove. And so hopefully that has that effect. I'm sure there will be some people that look at that and go like, hold on a second, this isn't right. And then they'll see conversations like this and they go like, you know what, I took that stupid class and that's exactly what they said. And but I think I don't know what the motivations are behind that. I mean, I think that um in a perfect world, if that organization was saying the right things, I mean, that would be great. That'd be great to get lifestyle doctors and general practitioners, family practice doctors, savvy on the lifestyle interventions that can really help people, because it can. I mean, there are a lot of very easy things to do that can significantly improve people's health and health outcomes, and get off medications, and really retake their life and their health. So I don't know what the motivations are behind that. I don't know if there's some lobbying uh, effects that are happening there, or if it's just like, hey, this might be a good thing to focus on preventative medicine, which I agree with. I think preventative medicine and preventative health is great, but you have to have the right preventions. And I mean, even just getting people off processed garbage is a step in the right direction. But yeah, I mean, I wish it wasn't. The Seventh Day Adventists group that they were going to be funding with this.